My name is Shaik and I am based at the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Cape Town. My area of specialization within the study of religion is Islamic studies and gender and feminist theory. Within Islamic studies, my own particular interest lies in the area of Islamic mysticism, or what is also known as Sufism. For my project here at STIAS, I'm working on a manuscript of thinking through the ways in which Muslim gender ethics of the contemporary period can be reanimated, revived, constructively responsive to the contemporary ethical challenges by drawing on the tradition of Islamic mysticism in conversation with the ways in which we are addressing contemporary challenges. Part of the ways in which I think about tradition is a dynamic, unfolding relationship to a set of resources and a set of beliefs and a continuity with a way of being in the world. I'm particularly committed to thinking through questions of social justice and religion in relationship to gender and sexuality in particular. So a lot of my work is looking at what I consider to be the ethical challenges of the time, what is being referenced in our community, in our world, in our society, in our local context as being challenging in terms of social justice. And then I am looking at how the tradition thinks about responses, both in terms of what it is that defines us as human beings at the deepest, most fundamental level of our being, so kind of deep ontological questions, and then how those ontological questions or responses to those ontological questions might inform how we think about our politics and how we think about engaging the world in a social political form. And so a lot of the work that I do is to be thinking creatively through the relationship between spirituality on the one hand and politics on the other, through how we think about our location within the Muslim tradition particularly. This particular book project is intended both as a scholarly work, but also as a project of constructive rethinking of the Muslim tradition in response to a set of contemporary challenges. And gender and sexuality is a challenge. Questions of gender justice are challenges for all communities in a variety of different spaces in the world. I think there are very few spaces that have the kind of forms of gender relationships that one would consider profoundly egalitarian at every level. And so I'm working particularly within Muslim communities and thinking through how specific challenges might be met, and thinking through what are the underpinnings of how we respond to a specific gender challenge. So some of my earlier work as a student started by responding to a very kind of real everyday challenge around the abuse of women in marriages, so wife abuse, or what you would call spousal battery. And I was thinking through and interviewing women who were in relationships that were in abusive relationships with their partners. And what I was trying to uncover was what are the ways in which the community, helped the woman or enabled the violence. What are the ways in which the woman herself thought about the nature of this violence and how to respond to it? What were the ways that religion was invoked in this phenomenon of the battering of wives by husbands? And what I kind of came to at the end of this was that, in fact, what we needed to be thinking about broadly as a community and as individuals is how to rethink the very nature of what it means to be a human being. That a lot of the ways in which people were thinking about violence was premised on very specific understandings, not only of the relationships between men and women, but who men and women fundamentally are in relationship to one another. And so the challenge was for me then to say, well, actually, if there's a specific understanding of what men and women's roles are and who they are, perhaps we need to go back to those before we can address these social, cultural challenges and real fundamental injustices and brutalities. So a lot of the work that I did subsequently to that time is to be looking at the tradition and saying, what is the conception of the human being? And there are some extraordinary narratives that many people don't hear until they kind of be working on specific scholarly work. And the question is, how do you retrieve? So a lot of my work is feminist. And I use the term feminist without too much difficulty, but I also recognize that it's a complicated term for many people. Really, my work is about centralizing questions of gender justice. And I think there's a rich tradition of thinking through gender in ways that are deeply humanizing, elevated, egalitarian within the tradition. There are also ways about thinking about gender that are deeply problematic and patriarchal. And so my work is to retrieve those resources that think about gender in the most expansive, inclusive ways that we can engage with and elaborate for this time and this space.